The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Welcome to it. Great to be with you on a Wednesday. It's Hail Varsity. We're powered by Cornhead Lager, Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. Hope you're doing all right. Plenty to get into on the recruiting front today for Big Red football. We'll spend plenty of time there. Some more thoughts on Nebraska football with Mike Babcock from Hurrdat Sports and Hail Varsity. Babber's going to check in about 15 minutes or so. Good news for Nebraska and all sorts of college football programs with more eyes and voices allowed to be part of that on-field instruction. We'll get there. The blue blood ratio. When we talk 4- and 5-star talent, you have CBS Sports and their storyline. What's it take? And your past champions. What's their percentage been of 4- and 5-star recruits that have gone on, those teams that went on to win the whole bleeping thing? In hour two, Grant Wistrom going to join us. Husker great. His name's on the wall at the stadium. And Grant will talk some football with us, but also topic of medical marijuana and the opportunity Nebraska has for medical marijuana legalization for November. First things first, it's signatures that are needed. Grant will join us in the 5 o'clock hour. Evan Bland from the Omaha World-Herald. And then Dr. Brandon Seifert, a Jock Doc from Nebraska Orthopedic. Elijah, how you feeling, man? It's less gross outside. The disgusting-o-meter is not even registering today because we're back to normal summertime temps. It's good. It feels good.
Some people would say here in this studio the disgusting-o-meter is always at an all-time high.
It is. The only thing you're missing is a towel, no shirt, and a bench where you're at.
I thought you were going to go sauna with that one.
That's what I meant.
Okay, you were going sauna.
Yeah,
okay.
The only thing you're missing is...
Yeah, okay. This reminds me of this summer whenever I decided in order to save time at the gym, I would do my ab routine in the sauna. People didn't quite like that.
There are sauna rules, right? You listen to Charles Barkley talk, and one of the funniest moments on Inside the NBA was
the bracelet.
The bracelet, yeah. Chuck was talking about his friendship bracelet, and Chuck didn't even know the guy's name, and Kenny and Shaq got all over Sir Charles. So some dude gave you a bracelet in the sauna, did he?
I love that segment.
And it was pretty good. You didn't even know his name, Chuck. Pretty good. Shaq's going to be in the great state of Nebraska.
He is. He's doing a show here in Lincoln.
Yeah, day or two, which is awesome.
Yeah. Abs in the sauna, great way to scare everybody else off.
Usually it's a 3-person limit.
Yep.
It
becomes a 1-person limit if you're doing abs in there.
You have guy in the corner when you walk in. You have guy up top, and then other dude scooched all the way to the right, and everyone's preferably covered. That should be there's a lot of things. There's a lot of signs out there, rules and regulations, common sense, reminders, speed limits, no parking, pick your dog's dookie up, all that stuff. But and at least at my workout facility, there is the sign right by the light switch before you go in, must be covered with towel.
Yes.
And there's no volunteer to go make that enforcement happen. There's no bat phone in the sauna.
No, that'd be a hilarious job to have at the gym. Yeah, I am a sauna towel monitor. I just stand in the sauna and make sure everybody's following the rules.
There needs to be rules. There needs to be enforcement there. Some folks just don't care. It is what it is.
Luckily with my ab routine, I just got like a little washcloth and covers everything.
So you're just sitting there. You're not doing push-ups. You're doing crunches.
Sometimes you do both. I have stopped doing this because I have understood how uncomfortable it probably
Did you stop when someone walked into the sauna and shook their head at you?
I would hope they would just walk out before they sat down. I hope they'd walk in and be like, oh, this crazy person's in here doing abs. I guess it's his sauna for now. That was kind of the goal.
Well, you walk in with your earbuds and hope they didn't melt. So we'll get into some recruiting here. Let's get our starting 5 shout-outs. KG is in. I relieve my bladder on the steaming rocks. Makes it extra hot. That is also a no-no, KG. Get you kicked out or suspended. Jimmy is in. Jimmy, good to have you in the stream. If you want to watch the show, easy for you. Hail Varsity YouTube, like and subscribe there. Hail Varsity Twitter at HVarsity Radio. Different platforms across the Hail Varsity Radio network and social media. Also to catch the show, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play for the podcast download. But lots of arrows being shot at Trev by A&M fans. They're ticked off at Schloss. And then they're ticked off at Trev, like he had any control of this. I'm going to stick up for Trev. We've always been pretty big Trev guys, still big Trev guys, despite his departure. I'm not mad or angry at him. Wish him well. Trev's always been good to us. That being said, A&M fan doesn't feel that way. They're taking their anger out on a guy that's only going to pour $80 million into their baseball facility. He's not been there 3 months. Okay, it's Big Bad Texas. It's his former boss. And the guy is rating his assistants and their better players to go to Austin. Not much you can do except go hire the right guy and beat him again.
There have been the reports, and it's hard to separate fact from fiction during this
Schlossnagle didn't say goodbye. He pulled a Petrino. Didn't even pull a Petrino. There wasn't even a note.
Well, there's been the report that Schlossnagle knew he's going to leave for months now because Trev came in and started clearing house among some administrative staff without talking to coaches, and that rubbed Schlossnagle the wrong way. So there's always that rumor of whose fault is it?
Or you're looking for a reason to go work for your old boss.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying is there's going to be a lot of that from Texas A&M fans. It's hard to separate fact from fiction, but at the end of the day, that's what I see this as, is going to work for your old boss you liked working for. Texas still runs the state of Texas as a whole, as a university.
And now they're in the SEC.
It's still top dog, and now they're in the SEC. There's a variety of reasons why it makes sense for Schlossnagle to jump ship and head off to the land that Bevo built. Mm-hmm. Like, a lot of reasons that make sense. I don't want to sift through fact from fiction here, but could Trev have done anything? We may never know. Similar to, could the Board of Regents have done anything to keep Trev around whenever Trev was threatening to leave Nebraska? We'll probably never know if there was anything they reasonably could have done, like know for certain. Maybe in the tell-all story that comes out 20 years from now.
The ESPN 30 for 30.
Yeah, exactly.
The day Trev left. Well, you got Dan and In. You got Matt Rule. You're all good. Now just go win some ball games. KG, we already shouted you out. You're in. Patrick is here. Justin is in. A-Dub, good to have you. Crew checking in as the sixth man. NASCAR Eric is here. Cliff in from Florida. Coach Brandon is here. The other Dave, Jeff, Tiger Shark Diver is also in. Scott, good to have you. The real Matthew is here. Good to have you, Matthew. Thanks for checking in. Sal is RSVPing. Good for him. Anonymous is here. Good to have you, Anonymous. And let's get in. Michael, thank you for making time for Hail Varsity today. 489-1240 or 800-825-5865 to get in. Well, we talked a lot about Nebraska, home field advantage, the intimidation factor, and where Nebraska's at. That was most of yesterday. And the answer to that is wins on the field. The answer to recruiting wins is also the same answer on this test. It is wins on the field. Let us discuss Nebraska recruiting and what happened earlier today. Dawson Merritt, four-star linebacker in Nebraska's 500-mile radius out of Overland Park. Listen, Nebraska did everything in their power to get kind of their linebacker top target. You've got Christian Jones that's still there. You've got Lofton that's still in play for Nebraska. You have Nebraska that is going after guys they like, whether they have a 3-star next to their name, a 4-star next to their name, or a 5-star next to their name. Nebraska has not closed on some of these higher profile prospects. You know why? Because Nebraska is in the conversation. Let's look at that for a moment. And that to me is not solace. You didn't get a kid you really wanted or thought fit well for you. But the fact Nebraska's in the conversation, to put a little silver lining to it, off of a 5-7 season is incredible. You don't have 5-7 home state schools in the conversation. You just don't. For Nebraska to be in position and still in position, there's no signing period right now. You have commits. Commits can flip. They can change. We'll see if Latif sticks. I don't know. But Merritt says, I'm going to Bama. Well, good for him. Bama's been to the college football playoff every year, with the exception of 2 years ago. And they've printed national championships. You now have a 12-team field, and the goal is to start winning at home to beef up your EA Sports rating. But in all seriousness, start winning at home, bump that record up to contention for your league, start winning at home so your November record isn't lonely the last several years. Start winning at home to show, right? You need to present some evidence. Lots of evidence is laid out. It's laid out by the nutrition folks. It's laid out by the academic folks. It's laid out by your head coach, your position coach, the staff, and some of the peers that are recruiting you. It's all there, except you haven't kicked off against UTEP yet. You haven't played Colorado in prime time yet. You haven't showcased against Ohio State at the end of October, and you haven't closed in November with, at minimum, a 500 record. This isn't Matt Rule's fault. It's not. It's just what Nebraska's been for 10 years. He's here to fix.
Well, how many guys over the past decade have made that leap of faith and said, you know what, I'm going to be the guy that turns around Nebraska and their career goes into the sinkhole that has been Husker football over the past decade? There's been a lot of guys.
I don't know that there's been a lot of guys you've hoped or you've been excited about as a ballyhooed recruit. You go back to Adrian. Mm-hmm. Adrian was absolutely mismanaged. And he didn't have a lot of help around him after his freshman year. Mm-hmm. It was like, here, kid, go win it for us. Yeah. That's my worldview on it.
And I'm not disagreeing with you at all, but was that a benefit to his future success in the game of football?
Clearly not, because he went somewhere else, balled out, and then he's...
That's what I'm saying. And you could say the same about Wan'Dale Robinson. You could say the same about Luke McCaffrey. Like, there's been guys that have made the leap of faith.
You've had enough talent to not be bullish for 8 seasons.
And you've had a lot of talent that has not lived up to their full potential at Nebraska.
Well, so part of that's coaching. Part of that's development.
That's exactly what I'm saying. It's exactly what I'm saying. So why, after 10 years of seeing that, would a recruit turn around and say, you know what, maybe Nebraska is going to have things right this time. Maybe I'm going to make that leap of faith. There's that see it factor that needs to happen first. Mm-hmm. At least that's my read among these recruits. You did really, really well.
Some of the big fish.
You did really, really well to get Dylan Riley here. He's going to be a great example for future recruits that, hey, Nebraska is not a place that's going to screw you up anymore.
No.
And you have that example, but you have to see the results on the field, whether that be in wins, whether that be in the development of players you're getting into the program. Maybe it's a guy that graduated 2 years before you and you got to play against him earlier in your preps career, and now you're watching him ball out at Nebraska. These are all factors that are going to be important here. And it kind of gets back to, is the sky falling? No. But does it show how right your decisions have to be during a rebuild if you're Matt Rule in Nebraska? I think that's what it shows me, is like, you're not going to get these guys making leaps of faith for Nebraska anymore because it's been so long since Nebraska has been relevant in putting guys into the league. Your runway is very short for a rebuild right now. It has to be in year 2. It has to be results, or else the recruiting is going to fall off the face of the earth because you're already falling behind the who's who of college football in these recruiting races. You've been behind them for a couple of years now, but The reason that you're in that final three but not getting the yes, in my opinion, is because guys want to see it before they're ready to make that leap of faith and say Nebraska is the place that's going to get me not only wins at this level, but get me to the next level.
They like and Rule said that in past pressers. This is the last year it's going to be this thin, and I'm paraphrasing, in the NFL draft. What you do have right now is everything but the record. That's what you have at Nebraska right now. You have promise. You have some guys that buy in and believe it before they see it. And you do have some examples on the defensive side of the football where guys that have been here a long time, a handful of them, played on a top 10 national defense in a league full of defense. And Nebraska didn't need to hold a candle in that second or third place. Were they the best defense? No, but considering what their job was every Saturday, comparatively speaking, only Iowa's defense has a probably bigger gripe. And by the way, Iowa's offense did enough to outduel Nebraska's offense last November with the kick. Hey, you saw in short order what you did on the defensive side of the football. What you got to do now is show that jump on offense.
So jump on offense, get some wins, and produce some high-level draft picks. That's an important part of this conversation, too.
All of that.
The two things recruits want to do is win football games and go get themselves drafted, go to the league, make themselves some money.
Sure.
Win some games, produce some draft picks, and the script could flip in recruiting.
Thing that is true. I mean, it's happened. He's produced draft picks at other stops. Chance to do it at a high level in Lincoln. Wins on the field. Mike Babcock on the way.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Take you back in. It's Hail Varsity, powered by Cornhead Lager on a Wednesday. You can email the show, Chris at hailvarsity.com. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, and we'll check in with Grant Wistrom here in about 35 minutes or so. Mike Babcock with us from Hail Varsity and Hurrdat Sports. You want Mike's bi-weekly letter and stories? Get it and subscribe to it. Doesn't cost you a thing. It's great and entertaining thoughts on Nebraska. We go to Mike's email, mikeb@hurrdatsports.com, at MD Babs on Twitter. Babbers, how we doing today? Thanks for checking in.
Hey, I'm doing okay. How are you guys doing?
We're good, man. We're just kind of grinding through June, ready for July and beyond. We're talking a little recruiting in Nebraska, aiming high for some high-profile targets, not because they're high-profile, but because they liked what they saw. And we're talking about that prove-it part of what's next for Nebraska, and that is the season, that is the wins. And, Mike, you've seen a lot of Nebraska football over the years, and you had such a machine going. Not only did you factor in evaluation, you factored in development, and Nebraska made it look good and easy for so long, where there was just a reload because of how big and how talented they were on the national landscape. And right now Nebraska's in a position where they've got to kind of prove that performance part of things right now.
Yeah, you've got to win. You guys talked about it, but that's the bottom line. I think you have to win in order to improve your recruiting, and you have to win to get the program the respect that it needs to move up in expectations. And it's more difficult now than it was at one time because, when you talk about development in a program, when you didn't have the transfer portal, when you didn't have NIL back in the day, you could bring in guys and you could develop them. They would stick around, you develop them, and by the time they were in the program for 2 or 3 years, they started to show what they could do. Now, you're not going to find very many high-level recruits who would come into a program and, quote, develop for a year or two. I'm not even talking 3, I'm talking a year or two, and stay with it if they aren't getting an opportunity to get on the field, because that means that they get the attention that they want in order to have an NFL draft potential. And you're just not going to get those players. And if you do, and they are being developed and they're not getting on the field, they're going to transfer. They're going to leave and go somewhere else. So you have to, one, get them in, get them on the field, and two, you have to win the games in order to get them here. That's the bottom line. I think it all comes down to winning. It always has come down to that. You've got to win. That's the thing.
Mike, with that in mind, what's your level of need for the Huskers to get it done and get some wins here this year, 2024? Do you worry about the recruiting beginning to fall off and you have a rough 2026 class if you can't stack up some wins in the 2024 season?
Well, yeah, I think you've got to show improvement. I mean, I don't think you can have another losing season and say that you're in a process, because I don't think that the student athletes have the patience now to look at it and say, oh, well, they didn't get it done again. They didn't get to a bowl game, but they're going in the right direction. They've got great facilities. They've got all these things. You can have all of that. You can have fan support. You can have a sellout streak. You can have all these things, but for the recruit, the bottom line is you got to win, and I got to have an opportunity to be part of that winning.
Mike, do you think Nebraska's done a good job in a short sample size of getting players engaged? And we talked a little bit about just how many guys we saw play and contribute meaningful moments, because there wasn't a lead on anybody last year big enough to put in some fifth-teamers from back in yesteryear. But has there been signs of that, at least so far, so good, during the Rule tenure?
Well, yeah, we've got 1 year. We can evaluate it based on one season. We can see that the players had an opportunity to get on the field. If they were doing well in the scout team and there was an opportunity or a necessity for them to get on the field, and they got on the field, they got the job done. I think that speaks well for your program. But again, to get the high-level recruits and to get them to stay, you've got to be successful. I think you've got to win, and it's much more difficult now to pull yourself up when you've kind of fallen off the grid of consistent national relevance. It's much more difficult now to get back than it once was, because of what I just said, and also because of the way conferences have broken down and the number of teams that you have in the Big Ten, the number of teams that you have in the SEC. It's really difficult, I think, to get those recruits and to get them to stay committed to you.
Mike, as we look at this conversation as a whole, how important do you think Dylan Raiola is in not only recruiting from a peer recruiting point of view, but showing development, getting wins on the field, getting Nebraska back to national relevancy? Not to pin it all on one guy, but that's kind of what I'm asking you here. How important is he in the conversation?
I think he's very important, and I think we're putting a lot of pressure on him. I think that he probably understands that when he came here, when he made the commitment here, because he is kind of the focal point of, what's going to be done here. Is Nebraska going to show significant improvement from last season? And is that improvement on the shoulders of the quarterback? It's that cliche, when things go right on offense, is on the quarterback, and when things go wrong, it's on the quarterback. That's the thing. Even though we've talked about it time and again, it's about the people around the quarterback as well. It's going to be, people are going to be looking at Dylan Raiola because here's a 5-star guy coming in, and he's going to be the guy, because you don't recruit a 5-star guy and then put him on the bench. And how does he perform in that context? How does he perform?
Mike, you know what a 5-star quarterback's best friend is? Well, two, you got a lot of buddies, but one, that offensive line we touch on all the time, but the running game. And Rule's pretty bullish on what the Big Red will be able to do Are you concerned at all with Nebraska's run game and how it will perform without the quarterback run element? Because that's how you got down to business last year. It was Harburg more so than the backs itself. Not that Emmett didn't have some nice rip-off runs in the fourth quarter, but to loosen up against stacked box, it was the option attack.
Yeah, I think the running game you have to establish the running game. You have to be able to show that you can run the ball, and you can run the ball inside, and you've got the offensive line that can open the holes to allow that to happen. And if you can do that, it opens up all kinds of possibilities for a quarterback. Gives a quarterback an opportunity that he wouldn't have if you don't have a running game. You don't want that quarterback to be out there running for his life on every down. You want to have some kind of a running game, so the defense has to be alert to that, and they can't just take off and go after the quarterback. That's that just is not going to work, and that's the thing that is important. I think is it starts up front. We talk about it all the time. Offensive line. Can the offensive line get the job done? If the offensive line can, you've got some guys at running back. If they can stay healthy, they can establish that running game. And if that running game is established, we've heard good things said about young receivers and the receiving room in general. And you've got a quarterback that has 5 stars by his name and has the talent. Otherwise, he wouldn't have that.
In the long line of Husker running backs that have been pretty high level, Mike, you've got the chance to cover a lot of them. How do you define what a Husker running back looks like on the field? To live up to the guys that have come before them, what is a Husker running back in your eyes? They've come in all sizes, really. I mean, it just so much of it. There's talent. Mike Rozier was a really extremely talented guy. He had a good offensive line in front of him. He made the offensive line look good, and the offensive line helped him. I mean, that was the kind of thing that in a best case scenario, you've got that running back, and it sounds like Nebraska is not necessarily looking at one guy to be the running back, but if you've got a running back of that quality, or Roger Craig, or Ken Clark, or Calvin Jones, Keith Jones, Lawrence Phillips. If you've got a running back that has that kind of talent, makes the offensive line look better. The offensive line makes him look better. It's a cooperative thing there, it doesn't matter. I think the size of the player. I couldn't really describe it from that standpoint. Just the ability and the willingness to do what's required of a running back. Sometimes it's not just running to the outside. It's being able to run up inside there and take some hits. That's the thing.
Mike, hang on for us. I want a couple minutes on the other side, because the other part of this, and Ross in the stream brings up a good point. Babbers, I want your take on it. We're up against it, but if you're on the stream, going to put Ross's comment here. David Sanders, remember the 5-star offensive lineman out of Charlotte? He is down to Tennessee and Ohio State. Apparently the NIL offers massive from old Rocky Top and Ohio State. Ohio State's got the old spending spree going for this beat Michigan or bust season. You have to be willing to pay and play ball in that aspect. We'll get into that part of the conversation here with recruiting as it relates to winning. Mike Babcock with Hail Varsity and Hurrdat Sports. A couple more minutes with Mike on the other side. 25 minutes away, Grant Wistrom going to join us. We'll talk with the Husker legend. And Evan Bland also checks in. Hail Varsity with you on a Wednesday. We continue. We're powered by Cornhead Lager.
Hail Varsity Radio is live. Now, back to Schmitty.
Schmitty's a great guy, but he don't have a brain.
And Elijah.
You want me to speak? When I point at you, yeah.
On Hail Varsity Radio.
Back with you a little bit more with Mike Babcock, Hail Varsity, Hurrdat Sports, at MD Babs on Twitter. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. Hope you're all right. Hail Varsity YouTube channel, like and subscribe. That's where you watch. You hear us on the Hail Varsity Radio Network. Babbers, the topic of NIL, and there is a cost of doing business now. Nebraska had a couple of factors working for Dylan. One, you have an NIL cooperative that took care of Dylan Raiola. 2, you had a family connection. 3, you had a idea and belief. Let's flip the program back in the right direction. All 3 of those factors worked out, and I don't know the NIL number specifically, but it was competitive enough that it wasn't a low ball number. When it comes to Nebraska, do you think they're specific on where they want to spend NIL resources per recruit, or is it a situation where it's going to be fit and you want to be here because you think X, Y, and Z can happen when you come to Lincoln versus coming in and asking how much money it is? I mean, right honestly, it's what drove Saban out of the game.
Yeah, I don't know that you're going to be able to dismiss NIL in any significant way. That's got to be a part of your recruiting pitch.
How big of a piece of the pie, though, right?
Yeah, well, I think it has to be a fairly significant piece of the pie.
Most of the
particularly
pie.
For Nebraska, because you're trying to get back. What we're talking about here is you're trying to get back to relevance in some way, and so you have further to go, and NIL is going to play a part in that. I think it's going to be because the elite programs, the ones that are consistently in a national championship conversation, are spending the money out there, and Nebraska is going to have to be in that kind of mindset, I think. And as you pointed out, it was good with Raiola. You had some family connection there as well, so that had to help, I think, in the long run. That was a big thing. But if you can be successful with him, and you've got some NIL, and now it's going to be just the programs themselves can initiate the NIL. Isn't that right? Isn't that the change in the rules? So you're basically, on some level, you're hiring these guys, and it's a big thing. The other factor that I didn't mention that I think figures into all of this is the internet, social media. I mean, that has changed it to the point now where it used to be, if you were really aggressive in recruiting, you could come up with some guys that not a lot of people knew anything about. And you would bring them in, and you would have an opportunity again to develop them and so forth. But now, everybody, there's no surprises. They're all out there. You can see it, just flip on your phone or whatever, and there it is. So I think that also affects how difficult it is to make that step back, because you're not going to pick up anybody that other people miss on.
Yeah, to your point, Mike, we had Tim Verghese on a couple weeks ago, and he essentially said, and we talked about it too, whenever Nebraska does find that guy that nobody else knows about, they offer him, and now everybody knows about him. So it's kind of that problem you find yourself in, is you can find the guy that nobody else knows about, but as soon as you find him, now everybody's going to know.
Yeah, and that's part of the difficulty in recruiting, because you don't slide under the radar on any of that stuff. It's out there, and you've got to maintain your connection, whatever it is, even if you're the first one to identify this particular student athlete.
Well, the question I have is, say back to the winning part. You have a decent to good season. People are optimistic. They're excited. They're willing to put more dinero in the offering plate. And then do you have other contributors versus, do you have other big dogs move forward? What does your NIL pool look like? I mean, how many folks are swimming in that pool You got a monster one. 1890 is incredible, but do you have other helpers out there, comparatively speaking? And I don't know Tennessee, but I know there's a lot of things in Tennessee, country music and Jack Daniels. A couple of examples, and with Ohio State, I mean, think of all of the businesses and industry and donors with Ohio State. So, that part of things for Nebraska, will it ramp up to be competitive or at that top tier level once you see some proof to want to kick back into? Because you've spent a lot of money if you're a big dog donor paying coaches to go goodbye.
Yeah, well, I think that you've got the money there. The thing that is difficult for Nebraska is you've got the money there, but if the money goes to NIL, then the money doesn't go to the donation of the athletic department in general. That can be a problem when you're trying to, they've created this upgraded facility that's really incredible or whatever, but those kinds of things take a lot of money, and some of that money now is going into NIL because I think big boosters are looking at it saying, well, I'd really rather spend the money on players. We want to get players here. That's the important thing. And that's a factor that doesn't necessarily impact some of these other programs in the way that it does Nebraska.
Quickly here, Mike, before we get you out, this tweet coming in from Bryson Weber, cornerback recruit out of Texas, 3-star or 4-star, depending on how you look at it, detailing his weekend visit with Nebraska that included getting a fishing legend from one coach, Tom Osborne. Your thoughts on Coach T.O. still being involved in the recruiting, taking kids out fishing?
I think it's great. I think, Coach Osborne is, he loves that fishing. So if that helps in recruiting, I think Tom would do whatever it took to help the program. I think it's really important to him. And, it's just, he's stayed involved all these years. And doesn't surprise me, I guess. And I think that's important because that's a recognizable name. That's a Hall of Fame coach. 255, 49-3, tremendous record. Keep him involved in whatever way you can.
Babbers, let's see the Grateful Dead shirt before we say adios. All right, this is
My neighbor gave me this one.
Who did?
A neighbor.
My neighbor.
Okay.
He saw me wearing one outside and said, hey, I got this one that I got from the 87 tour that I got just as I have never worn it. It was just a memento from the concert, and he brought it over to me and gave it to me. So I thought that was nice.
We need to fire up, Grateful Dead, either, Casey Jones or Ripple or something, and for the Babber unveiling each week of the Grateful Dead shirt of the week.
Now, this is an aside. I have like half of my softball team, rec league softball team, just got back from Vegas. They flew in at 4 a.m. the day of our game because they were at the Sphere in Vegas seeing the Grateful Dead over the weekend.
That's awesome.
I was jealous. It made me think of Mike Babcock.
Babbers, we appreciate you, brother. We'll talk next week.
Thanks for having me, guys.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
One final time, it's Hail Varsity. We're powered by Cornhead Lager, Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, 10 minutes away from Grant Wistrom. And good stuff here from Eat Beef. And put yourself in this situation. Maybe you are in this situation, but Eat Beef lays it out, his perspective. If I was a big donor, I would want my name on a plaque on the stadium somewhere rather than in an 18-year-old's pocket. And that's very, very fair. But you have, this goes back to the old Southwest days, the old Eric Dickerson Pony Excess, right? It was a competition for all the oil tycoons down in Dallas and the state of Texas. You went to Rice, huh? You see your dude at the country club or at the gym or in the steam room, Elijah. And
Sauna.
I
stay away from the steam room.
Okay.
The steam room's gross. Come on.
grosser than Elijah doing squats in a towel.
Hey, let's keep it accurate. It's sit-ups.
Sit-ups, forgive me.
With my fig leaf.
The point is you're saying, look, we got that back. We got that quarterback. We got this dude. I mean, it's been going on for years, and some programs have been getting busted for it, and some haven't. Now it's legal. And where do you to go get the top tier talent? You need two things to work. You need to get a kid that's hungry, but doesn't care about the money. But the money's got to be available. You can't miss, because what incentives an 18-year-old got to come in, go compete for a job, told he needs to work on XYZ, and he's got $1 million in the bank. He's set. And guess what? Doesn't like what he's hearing. He can go somewhere else for another $1 million next year. So that's the mess you're dealing with as a coach.
But on the flip side of things, what incentive does a kid have to come here if there isn't $1 million being promised?
His
you come
incentive
to a
would
place
be
where they don't win football games, a place where there hasn't been draft
you win
picks
ball
for years.
games. The incentive is you got a good quarterback and you're going to win football games, and this coach will get you the league. That's got to be shown.
Yeah, that's got to be shown. But that's kind of the balancing act that Matt Rule finds himself in right now. Of you don't want a kid who's just going to come here for the money, because at that first opportunity they're going to jump ship and go find another spot with money. But on the flip side of things, what can you show a kid whenever you have a whole bunch of other schools offering them boatloads of money, and you're saying, well, we just had a 5-7 season. We didn't have a draft pick last year, and it's been over a decade since our last first-round pick. Like, you find yourself in a real balancing act when it comes to trying to pull in and reel in high school recruits, and that's why I think you and I have said in multiple different ways this hour, it starts with getting the results in the field here in 2024.
I am not envious of the position you're in the world of college football.
I am envious of the paycheck that these head coaches
Absolutely. That paycheck's got to be, maybe you got to use your own. maybe you gotta budget for your recruiting.
Some people put 10% to Social Security, others put 10% to NIL.
Sure, that's the new motto. Pretty soon it's just 80% of your paycheck, right? 10 to church for some of you, 10 to NIL. And honey, we're going to get rid of your SUV because got to give till it hurts.
Honey, Social Security is going to be dead by the time we retire anyway.
Let's go win the lottery. So, hour 2 coming up. Grant Wistrom kicks this off at Hail Varsity. We're powered by Cornhead Lager.
The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Back with you. It's hour 2 at Hail Varsity. We're powered by Cornhead Lager. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. Hail Varsity is where you can watch the show. YouTube channel. Like and subscribe there. You can find us on Twitter. Hail Varsity Radio Twitter feed at HVarsity Radio, AM 590 Omaha's ESPN, KFOR Facebook and Twitter, and Central Nebraska's Superstation, ESPN 1460, 1550, Kearney, Hastings, Grand Island, and our friends in Columbus, News Talk 900 in Columbus. We'll check in with Evan Bland here in just a touch, and also a Jock Doc with Dr. Brandon Seifert going to be with us. We'll talk with Dr. Brandon, get his take on some Tommy John stuff. 489-1240, 489-1240, and 800-825-5865. Let's try and give him a shout. Let's do the phone. We were going to try and video Grant Wistrom here for our kickoff, and we'll see if that happens. Give him a holler on the horn. So we'll get Grant here. We'll talk some football with Grant, Husker legend and standout, and also the topic of medical marijuana with Grant. And Babber's put in a really good take with the respect factor, and it applies to a lot of things we've talked about this week. The respect factor for Nebraska football on the national landscape, the respect factor for Nebraska when it comes to the world of recruiting, and Nebraska going after some of these big fish in the world of recruiting and being on the doorstep but not landing them. And then the respect factor in the world of NIL. Nebraska's got some heavy hitters. How does it compare to the Ohio States and Tennessees of the world? So we'll get that figured out. So we'll figure that out with the respect factor. And that's true, right? Evidence needs to be presented for Nebraska on the football field, and that evidence front and center with not only the world of the EA Sports ranking from an intimidation factor standpoint, but also where Nebraska is at in the world of recruiting right now. And ESPN put out their top 40 list of recruiting, and their top 40 list does include Nebraska. They come in at 36. They like with what Nebraska has with some of the prospects. They're pleased that Nebraska has a quarterback in Dylan Raiola. They like some of the offensive talent that Nebraska's brought in. But Elijah, man, this is a situation where Nebraska still is down the rung in the recruiting world, the rankings, compared to some of the other Big Ten schools.
Yeah, but it kind of falls in line. I mean, you look at where Nebraska ended up in Phil Steele's preview magazine, mid-30s. Like, mid-30s is a healthy place to be in year two of the rebuild in all accounts, I would say, correct?
Yeah.
Is that me? Like, if you're mid-30s in the preseason rankings, if you finish the year mid-30s, if you get the recruiting rankings up into the mid-high 30s, even the low 20s, all like positive signs, I think, considering where Nebraska's been for the past decade. Like in modern college football, you've seen different programs have these microwave fast results under coaches, and that's never been Matt Rhule's style. Like mid-30s seems to be a place where I think you are healthy in your rebuild. Is it as fast as Husker fans want? No, probably not. But is that how Matt Rhule has made his hay across multiple rebuilds? Yes.
I think they're ahead of schedule from that year one to year two. Let's bring in a Husker Hall of Famer, College Football Hall of Famer, three-time national champ, Super Bowl champ, Grant Wistrom, walking and talking. Grant, good to talk, man. Good to have you on. How you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great, Chris. Thanks for having me on, man.
Appreciate you. You are just a dude that has got a lot of things going. I want to start off with your excitement level with your sending your little girl to go play soccer at Nebraska.
Yeah, we could not be more fired up for it. When the whole process started out, it was probably anywhere but Nebraska, just because she's a person that likes to do things on her own. And I made the mistake the first camp I brought her up to in Lincoln. I was dropping her off. She's like, "Dad, you can't come in." I'm like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "I got 6 hours to kill here. I'm coming in to watch play." She's like, "No, parents don't come in." And I just looked at her and I go, "Charlie," I go, "do you remember what town you're in?" I'm like, "I'll do whatever I want to here." And that was the wrong thing to say to the wrong person. So, it started out, the process, like I said, was anywhere but Nebraska. But as it went on, she just fell in love with the program, loves the coaches, the girls, and just couldn't be more excited about the opportunity to go up there and play for Coach Walker, who just is crazy how long he's been there. I mean, he was the coach when I was there. So I'm so excited for that. On a recruiting visit, we're going through the academic facilities there for the athletes, and there's a half a dozen people in that facility that were there when I was there. So it just felt like family again, and I just can't imagine how well she's going to be taken care of, and she's just excited for the opportunity to go play for Nebraska.
Well, that's really awesome.
And correct me if I'm wrong here. I'm pretty sure maybe it's 2 times ago we talked to you. Maybe it was even last time we talked to you. Wasn't she playing football, kicking field goals?
Yeah, she did. I think it was her sophomore year of high school. She was a kicker for our football team I was coaching, and she came out and kicked for us. Did a pretty damn good job.
Well, that might be the one kicker you've liked, right?
The only one. I promise you, it's the only one, man.
At Grant Wistrom on Twitter is where you can find him. Grant, we'll go to football here. We've talked a lot today. Nebraska is in the hunt for some big fish in the recruiting world, and they're right there, but they're just missing out on some 4 and 5 stars. It's not for lack of effort or connection or communication, but other teams have some NIL arsenals. It's a reality. And the reality, too, is you've got a season, albeit just a second season, to kind of show your work for future classes. And you're a guy that you chose Nebraska, I'm sure, because of connection, but also, they were kind of winning back when you decided to enroll.
Yeah, it did make the decision a lot easier. But I really fell in love with the place because the guys that were there. But it's because the guys that were there and the mental makeup that they had and the grit that they had, that's why they were winning. So, I mean, it really does go hand in hand. But, yeah, the fact that they were as good as they were at the time, played for the national championship the year before I got there, and just with the ability of my connection to connect with the guys that were already in place there. And like I've told you guys all the time, those are the guys I was going to be playing with for 4 years. Guys I was going to be bleeding with, fighting with, and I just want to make sure that, that I'm one of them and they're one of me. But I know you got to get some 4 and 5 star guys, and I know we talk about this all the time too. Give me the 3-star guy that wants to play for Nebraska any day of the week. I'll take him. A guy that that's going to be there 4 or 5 years, give you an opportunity to develop him and take ownership in the program. I will take that over a 4 or 5 star any day.
Grant Wistrom's with us on Hail Varsity Radio. Grant, let's talk about your business and what you are doing, and that's trying to spread the word about medical marijuana. You aren't just talking about it, you're investing in it. You started your medical marijuana business back, I believe, 2021 it launched?
Yeah, we opened our doors here in Missouri 2021.
Revival 98. On the ballot, up for grabs, Nebraska and medical marijuana. 30,000 signatures needed to qualify. This is the third attempt to get it on the ballot for November and be voted on in the November election. You have medical marijuana legal in 38 states. And talk to me a little bit here how it is going. You have a deadline here approaching early part of July.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, guys. I'm going to make you move with me for a second, make you a little sick. I left
Blair Witch Project.
Right. I left my phone out in the kitchen, and I got some notes I need on there.
No, it's fine.
Recite it from memory.
Well, give us a talking tour of the home, dude.
Yeah, well, here it is. Here's for about another 8 or 6 months anyway. This is where we're going to live. So,
So Grant is going out to the garage. Is it a dude cave or no?
Oh no, I went to the kitchen. So
Okay.
I just had to grab my cell phone in the kitchen.
Sure.
All right, sorry about that.
No, you're good.
But no, we've got about there's about 90,000 signatures right now on the that they've taken. And they only need 87. But the issue is, they're going to contest any signatures, and they're going to do anything they can to fight this. So we're really shooting for about 115 to 120,000 signatures. We feel like if we can get the numbers to there, then there's no reason to contest it. Sometimes you average, from what I've heard, 10 to 20%, disqualified signatures. So, if we can get to 115, 120,000, they're not going to fight us on that. They're going to have to try to fight us in the courts. So, and I'll take my chances on that. It backfired on us last time, but I think we're fully prepared to take it on this time.
Grant, let's spend a minute on why medical marijuana is a cause for you. What was your life like as a player trying to gear up in the NFL?
So, I'm normally a very, very good-natured guy. I haven't been in a lot of fights. I'm quick to there's no need for it. Life's too short. I'll take my business elsewhere if I'm getting static anywhere. So to play football, I really had to work myself into a frenzy and just go to a place that I just mentally don't normally operate at. And when you're doing that, when the game's over, you don't just immediately go back. If you're normally operating at a intensity level of 15 to 20 and you take it up to 100 for 4 hours and you're ramming your head against a wall and fighting grown men, when that whistle blows, you don't immediately drop back down to a 15, 20 on the intensity level. You're still at 100. And so, the wind down for me would usually be drinking way too much. If, I got nicked up that game, I'd have a couple pills to, wash down. And just knowing the toll that took on my body. It really, obviously it's not good for you long term, but even short term, I would wake up with so much more inflammation the next day. I felt horrible. And it just made my recovery for the next game even harder. And then I started using cannabis a little bit early in my career. If we had a road game, I would have some brownies made for the flight home, eat a couple brownies. And so I wasn't drinking anymore, or I wasn't drinking. I still drank, but not near what I did before I started cannabis. And just seeing how it aided in my recovery. Obviously it's not near as bad for your body as alcohol is. I felt so much better the next morning. So that's how it impacted me personally. And then, my aunt at the time was going through was dealing with terminal cancer and doing chemotherapy and radiation, and just, nothing tastes good. I'm in pain all the time. So, she lived in Oklahoma and it wasn't legal at the time. So I started, getting her some cannabis and taking care of her. And then also my dad's a Vietnam vet, almost 80 years old, and still has, getting worked up, still has nightmares. So I started talking to him about it and started getting him some medicine too. And I saw the improvement it made in his life. I saw how it eased my aunt's suffering toward the end of hers. And so when there was an opportunity to get involved in Missouri, when, they were talking about making medical cannabis legal here, I jumped at the opportunity. There's a lot of stigma around it, which I believe is false. It's false narrative. So I haven't been incredibly vocal about it, but I know the wonders it's done for me and people that I love. And so, I'm all about it now. I want to be in front of this, and, hopefully have an opportunity to participate in this in Nebraska.
Grant, if people feel so compelled, this petition, how can they get involved? How can they get their signature on it?
Okay, so right now there's 7. That's why I grabbed my phone. Thank you for going there. So there's 7 days left to sign, and you can sign at all the Metro wine, beer, and spirit locations in Omaha and Lincoln during business hours. And then if people have petitions that they've gotten signatures on, they have to be dropped off by Monday night at a beer, wine, and spirits in Lincoln or Omaha. It's currently too late to email them back to the campaign. So if you have, and also I'd like to say, if you've signed it in the past, but it's not within the last 6 months, you need to sign again. Those signatures are not valid. So, a lot of people believe, well, I've already signed that. Well, if it was 6 months ago or longer, you need to get back out there and get this signed if you want to be able to have access to this medicine in Nebraska.
Grant, we're up against a hard break. Can we take a couple minutes on the other side with you?
Absolutely.
All right. Grant Wistrom with us. We talked some football. We talked some soccer, and we're talking medical marijuana. At Grant Wistrom on Twitter is where you can follow him, and he is in the medical marijuana business. And when I say business, that's a chance for folks to get some help they need from a doctor's prescription. Revival 98, his company. More with Grant Wistrom here on Hail Varsity, powered by Cornhead Lager.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back with you, it's Hail Varsity. We're powered by Cornhead Lager, Schmidt and Elijah Herbel, and Husker Hall of Famer, Super Bowl champ. It's Grant Wistrom with us. We're talking the topic of medical marijuana, the Nebraska medical marijuana ballot and initiative and signatures. Grant will reset some of that again here before we say goodbye. But this is a hot button topic. It's a hot button topic in the state of Nebraska. This is the third attempt to get it on the ballot, Grant, and you've kind of laid out the why for you, why you are part of this. And you've heard from so many. You've testified in front of the unicameral, but you've also, your whole life, have been in front of Nebraska fans, but you've been in front of kids. You've been in front of parents. I mean, you're used to that life. And you've had parents, I'm sure, come up to you and discuss treatment options, or you've had others confide in you about loved ones that have been suffering. Spend a minute about not dealing with that, but being a part of those conversations. You shared your own personal story.
Yeah. So, I live in a town much smaller than Lincoln. We are the buckle of the Bible Belt. I didn't care. I knew what I was stepping into. I knew some, like you said, the stigma around it, and I didn't care because I know what the power of the plant is. And I expected to catch some static from some people, and it has been the complete opposite. I have not had one person come up to me and tell me that I'm doing something wrong and that I'm a part of something that I should be ashamed of. Every person that's come up to me has been in it from the people you would not expect. It's not like the 19-year-old kid, with long hair, that you would expect. That's like, hey man,
it's not Spicoli.
No, Spicoli is not knocking on my door. It is my parents' friends. It is the old butthole at the gym that nobody wants to talk to, and you think he's just the biggest jerk in the world. It's everybody, and every single person is coming with a story saying thank you. You have no idea what you all have done. It's changed my life. It's changed the quality of my life. I have a friend whose father was going through, he had prostate cancer, and their treatment wasn't going well. And his dad's probably in his 80s, maybe early 90s. And clearly someone that, he missed out on, the hippie movement, and just somebody that's probably never been a part of this. But he was struggling at the end. So my friend reached out to me. He's like, hey, could you talk to my dad? And I'm like, yeah, I got the guy for you. So I sent him over to our dispensary, and our manager there is phenomenal. He's been in the business for a long, long time. And he sat down and talked with him and educated the guy on it. And by the time they left, he left with a couple bags of edibles and was looking forward to his first good night's sleep in months. So, it's just story after story like that, that you're doing the right thing, and when I got into this, it had to get on the ballot, but then my journey to get into it, it was doors just kept opening, and people that had been out of my life for years who have experience in cannabis just happened to be driving through town and needed a place to stay, so that they stayed at our house, and we just started talking about it. And then that guy introduced me to that guy. Then that guy introduced me to that guy. And it got me here. So I have no problem with what I do. I sleep very well at night. And I know that what we're doing helps a lot of people.
Grant, let me ask the question, with medical marijuana potentially being on the horizon in Nebraska, how have you seen the state of Missouri change since medical marijuana has been legalized?
You haven't. You're not hearing about people ODing on marijuana on the news. You're not hearing about any increase in DUIs, drug, whatever, the substance is. It is as if nothing has changed, except people are getting medicine that need medicine.
Grant, what about the national narrative? Have you found in your circles and also your opponent's circles that has there been acknowledgement that the attitude has changed?
I think that we all know that the attitude has changed. It's just if people are willing to acknowledge it. Just like when we had the signatures to get it on the ballot before, I think it was polling around 70 or 80% in Nebraska. People wanted it. And the fact that the government steps in and gets to say, hey, I know you guys want this. I know there's validity to it. I know that we ran a smear campaign a long time ago to vilify this product. But we're just not going to let you have it. You all aren't mature enough to handle this responsibility. And that doesn't sit well with me either. So there's any number of reasons why, and I believe a part of that is the government doesn't want big pharma makes no money on it. I believe that the money controls the power. I believe that they fight it. I think that even alcohol has taken a big hit. Consumption has taken a big hit due to cannabis being legalized in so many states. So, there's money to fight it, and that's what happened the last time it was on the ballot. And I think it's just ridiculous that it went that route.
It's Grant Wistrom with us here on Hail Varsity Radio. Grant, we'll get back into this here in just a second, but I do want to go to Husker football because we're talking national perception of marijuana. We got to go national perception of Matt Rule and the Husker football program. Want your somewhat outsider's perspective down in Missouri, the rebuild that's happening, the impact of a guy in Dylan Ryle, some expectations for 2024. Your thoughts on what's going on here in Lincoln?
I hear good things about Dylan. So I'm excited to see that. It's a lot of pressure put on a young man coming in as a freshman and being the quarterback for the University of Nebraska, who is just starving to have a good season. So I know there's going to be a lot of pressure on him, and I hope that, he just goes out there and plays his game and is comfortable in it. And I think if he does that and doesn't try to live up to anybody else's expectations but his own, he's going to be just fine. As far as Coach Rule, I don't get to follow a lot, about how practices have gone, during spring and things like that. But one thing that I do see a lot about is the portal. And what I love to see is there haven't been a lot of guys leaving. And it's really easy to go somewhere these days. So what that tells me is he's building a culture there where guys are buying into the program and buying into playing for each other more than playing for themselves. Because I'm sure there's some guys that could have probably left and got more money elsewhere. But they like what he's doing there. So, that in itself gives me good hope for next year. I do believe that that's what, we didn't have. I don't even know if we ever had a top 20 recruiting class when we were there. But we had a bunch of dudes that loved to play football, that would punch you in the mouth for, 60 minutes on a Saturday and ask you if you wanted more. And we didn't need the 4 and 5 star recruits, just because we had the guys there that love to play the game. And, hopefully, that's the type of guys he's bringing in there.
Could you see teams in their eyes and their body language where they intimidated with the teams you were on?
Yes. Yeah. And, and nobody wants to admit that, but nobody wanted to mess with us back then. Some guys got, a couple of teams got lucky and beat us. A couple of teams got lucky and stayed close to us, and out of, 54, 55 football games, you're going to have a couple close ones. But no, we enjoyed every Saturday. That's what we worked all week long for Saturday, to go out there and just try to punish someone else.
How did you scare the teams? This sounds stupid, but you guys are there's other guys that are on scholarship at 6'6", 3 bills as well you're lining up against.
Yeah, you spend all week long watching video of your opponent, and you see what they're capable of, and you know what you're walking into on Saturday. And then we would physically beat up teams, and I would love to have known what the record was for opponents we played the week after they played us. That'd be an interesting stat.
Grant Wistrom with us, Hail Varsity Radio. Grant, we'll get you out on this, and we talk a lot about football, and we spend a lot of time here when it comes to medical marijuana and the petition drive and the signatures needed. Reset again for folks if they want a chance to vote on this in November. The deadline, what needs to happen, and all of the particulars.
Yeah, so there's 7 days left to sign. And if you haven't signed within the last 6 months, please get out and sign again. If you haven't signed in 6 months, your signature is invalid. So if you haven't done it, you need to get out to the Metro at the Wine, Beer, and Spirits and the Metro locations in Omaha or Lincoln. And if you've been out pounding the pavement, part of the grassroots campaign collecting signatures for this, and you still have some petitions and you haven't turned them in yet, you have a week to turn them into the wine, beer, and spirit locations in Omaha or Lincoln. It's too late to email them back in. So if you've got those, please don't let those signatures go to waste.
Grant, before we get you out, one last thought here. We did this with the Kentucky Derby, a Husker-themed Kentucky Derby horse name. Can you give us a Husker-themed weed strain name?
Thank you. You are full of good questions tonight, Elijah.
Thank you.
So actually, I'm so excited about this. I have the best name. And it's a real thing. I know a grower, and he asked me what my favorite, how I like the plant to taste, how I like it to look, how I like it to feel. So he made a strain for me. He crossbred 3 different plants and made a strain for me, and there's officially a Black Shirt 98 strain.
Really?
Yep. So I really, really hope I get to administer that to some people in Nebraska one day. I'm so fired up about that.
Who's your first patient?
Me? I'll be living there then, man. I'm going to be the first to sign up.
No, I know that, but legal and all good. You got a buddy in mind?
He's not outing anybody?
No.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest with you. I don't think any of my friends are strangers to it.
Yeah.
So there's, I'm pretty sure I'm not going to have to sign anybody up. They're all going to be knocking on my door.
Get back in line. Yeah.
Yep.
Grant, take care, man. Looking forward to having you here, and thanks for sharing your thoughts.
Hey, thank you so much for having me on, guys. And I know that you've been a big supporter in this all along, so I really appreciate that. And can't wait to get up there and be with you all soon.
Be good, man. Take care, bud. There he is, Grant Wistrom. We'll have this interview posted on the podcast page as well, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, where you can hear the full interview. And also on the YouTube channel, Hail Varsity YouTube. Just think of some loved ones. And my point of view is this, some loved ones that could have had this as an option or an opportunity. And that's where I'm coming from with it, much like Grant. A Jock Doc's on the way. Dr. Brandon Seifert going to join us. Nebraska Orthopedic. It's Hail Varsity, powered by Cornhead Lager.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Big thanks to Grant Wistrom for spending time with us here. Let's talk Jock Doc Wednesday, Nebraska Orthopedic Center. Dr. Brandon Seifert's with us. Dr. Brandon, how are we doing? Thanks for joining us.
Hey, you bet, Chris. How are you guys doing?
We're good. We are good. We're looking forward to the 4th and some family fun and all that good stuff. And baseball, of course, a big part of the 4th of July. And Dodgers, man, they are, they're supposed to win it, right, this year. And you've got another issue here with Yamamoto being dinged for the first time in his career. Strained rotator cuff to that right shoulder. Not season ending, but let's talk about how dicey this is.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we've kind of done the whole spectrum on shoulder injuries and our throwers, and it's always, kind of fascinating to look at how different, kind of shoulder injuries play into different sports. And so, we've talked a lot about our thrower shoulders, our overhead athlete shoulders, and kind of the different types of injuries they have and essentially how they respond to those differently. And so in his scenario, we're talking about a rotator cuff, pretty common term that's out there. Anatomically, when we're talking about a rotator cuff, issue. So essentially there's 4 kind of large muscles that surround the shoulder joint's ball and socket joint. Then those 4 muscles, rotator cuff muscles, have basically it's the teres minor that's in the back, infraspinatus is on the top towards the back, supraspinatus in the front, and you've got your subscapularis in the very front. Those are kind of your 4 main muscles in the air that encompass the rotator cuff. Obviously, they're involved in all types of different types of shoulder motion. In his scenario, they're talking more about rotator cuff strain, which essentially means kind of a stretch injury, inflammation of that rotator cuff. Clearly, as a thrower, that's going to bother you, be quite irritating. And again, from a throwing perspective, the rotator cuff really does play a special role when it comes to thrower shoulders and how they recover from this, and in particular, kind of how they look long-term in terms of their prognosis.
Dr. Brandon, whenever you look at this injury to the rotator cuff of Yamamoto, it came after a start at Yankee Stadium. He threw a season high in pitches at 106. He threw all 19 of his 19 hardest pitches of the season in that start, and he also threw more sliders in that game than in any other start this season. The quote from Manager Roberts of the Dodgers was that they're kind of still trying to learn about him as an athlete, how to best manage him. So we would assume that there would be a link there. How does that rotator cuff get injured specifically whenever you're talking about a guy who's throwing more pitches and throwing them harder than he has at any point this season?
Yeah, it's kind of a combo here. I would say the vast majority of injuries we see in the rotator cuff in our throwing athletes, it's more of an overuse phenomenon. We tend to see it kind of early in the season when it comes to the rotator cuff in the back, which we call the teres minor. So teres minor tendonitis, very common. We tend to see it early in the season, whether it's an issue of not having enough time to kind of transition back into that throwing program, or it's just a matter of kind of too much volume. You tend to see issues there. And then you start to move more towards the front, so kind of that very front edge of that top rotator cuff we call the supraspinatus. We tend to see issues kind of on that very front edge, and it's kind of actually up underneath that rotator cuff. It's interesting when you see these in surgery with the arthroscope, right where the kind of biceps kind of comes into the top of the socket of the joint. That biceps tends to kind of rub on that undersurface of that rotator cuff. That's more kind of chronic wear and tear. So those would be the two most common scenarios you see. And then the third scenario, which fortunately is more rare, is actually kind of one throwing event in particular where you actually have some partial tearing happen in that rotator cuff. Fortunately, in our throwing athletes, our pitchers, it's quite uncommon. That one tends to be a little bit more problematic long term. In this scenario, this is probably more of kind of a volume issue. Here we are already in kind of June, almost July. This is probably more of that kind of chronic wear and tear inflammatory problem.
So after an injury such as this, the wear and tear, a little bit of overuse, what's the best way to manage him once he does get back? He's currently on the 15-day IL.
Yep, and so for these folks, you said it already, rest is always that big thing for these folks. You got to get them some rest. We've talked before about, it's so hard to try to rest in season. It's hard to do that. It's hard to just give them enough time. So they tend to kind of struggle a bit when they do get back until the season ends and they get longer time off. But rest is key. Then you start talking about, obviously, anti-inflammatories on board is helpful. Clearly at that kind of level, they're doing a bunch of imaging, MRI scans, that kind of stuff to make sure structurally things are sound, and it sounds like his is. So for him, some rest, anti-inflammatories, and then the other key part of this is when you get to that other side of the rest phase, being able to kind of work back into it. So they talk about kind of a rehab stint down in the minors, having an opportunity to come back and, cut down on your pitch volume. That's really important. Where I see mistakes being made, especially at our younger levels, is folks come off, a rest phase and then boom, the next day, yep, you're clear to go, and they're on the mound throwing 100 miles an hour. They haven't had an opportunity to kind of work back into it. So that's really kind of that key as you transition somebody off of rest phase in the middle of the season.
Dr. Brandon Seifert's with us, Nebraska Orthopedic Center at Jock Doc Wednesday. Yamamoto and that rotator cuff strain, our topic today. Are you concerned? Would you be concerned that he's having some issues here, or is this just wear and tear? I mean, I'm talking age here, and we're talking rotator issues.
I think probably for him, age probably is a factor for him. I didn't get an insight as to kind of one injury in particular that he had. It's probably more of kind of an age and wear and tear issue for him. Again, typically you're going to see that kind of acute inflammatory response that's more earlier in the season. And as we're kind of getting close to midseason, that's what I would lean towards in terms of that diagnostic pathway.
Dr. Brandon, what type of monitoring do you believe the Dodgers will do once he's cleared? He's back on the hill. Let's talk pitch count, yes, but also just maintenance here.
Yeah, so you've got that going on. The maintenance piece for him is really going to be kind of the mainstays of great warm-up, good flexibility. Anytime you're kind of ramping up that, pitch count, volume, you want to make sure you do it at a gradual level. Those things are important. He also needs to be, aware of, making this medical staff aware of kind of how's he feeling. You don't want to get up to that sharp pain level. You don't want to have kind of like that just slowly, gradually worsening pain each day that's kind of building on itself. So those things you want to watch out for, and maybe you schedule in a couple extra rest days for him in the rotation. All those kind of things are the things you're looking for. And you might even reach a point with him where if you are struggling to get over the hump with that rest, I didn't mention this before, but this would be a good scenario where maybe you think about putting in some PRP. We've talked about that before. Perhaps even some stem cell treatment for this would be a reasonable thing to do if you can't get on top of that inflammation.
Dr. Brandon, in terms of both the rest and relaxation part of things and then the ramping up process potentially through minor leagues, but we expect a lower pitch count for him as he ramps back up, what do you think the total timetable for recovery is here before he's back to 100% or near it?
Yeah, to me it seems maybe a touch short on the rest phase for him, 15-day for him, and sometimes they'll just do that initially and then extend it out with all the team mechanics of moving people around. But it seems a bit short. But it might just be also an indicator that maybe this is quite low grade on the inflammatory side, and so hopefully that's the case. Which then means 15 days, maybe up to 3 weeks, is going to be a good rehab stint for him. Typically with these, though, if you start to flare up that rotator cuff at that level, you could be looking at anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks, maybe longer.
Dr. Brandon, fourth plans. What do you got coming up here, man? Real quick.
Hey, looking forward to some good family time. Maybe get a little fireworks in for sure. How about you guys?
Elijah is driving us down to Missouri.
That is not true. Well, see, now after our interview with Grant, we had to clarify for fireworks.
Well, yeah, we're driving down to see. We're going to go get fireworks in Missouri.
Might have the State Patrol following you down there.
We'll take the wife's car. Dr. Brandon, you take care. We'll talk soon.
Hey, guys, y'all take care. Thanks again. See ya.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Big thanks to Grant Wistrom for joining us. We'll also tip the cap to our dear friend Mike Babcock. Thank you much. And Dr. Brandon Seifert with us from Nebraska Orthopedic Center. Feedback in the stream when we spent some time on the topic of medical marijuana with Grant Wistrom. Folks are engaging in civil discourse. That's always pleasant.
That's always appreciated.
Yeah, it is. And if you didn't like the discussion point, sorry. But you have a chance to either say yay or nay to it again. Mm-hmm. And that's totally your call. And I'm not telling you which way to go. Some of you feel really strongly against medical marijuana, and that's your call. If push comes to shove and the option's there, I would love the opportunity to have that as a choice for a loved one over an opioid.
My main thing here is I think it's important for the people of the state to determine what they want in their own state. So yeah. I like it getting to an open ballot, open election, let the people decide whether or not we have medical marijuana in this
sure.
state. That's kind of my angle I take on this is why not let the people decide? Do we know what the people are going to say?
Well,
no, but let's find out.
The doctors have the final call and say with the ones that got to green light this. Assuming it gets on a ballot, there's still a chance for that to happen. It may not. Hey, it's in the good state of Nebraskans' hands for this to be a reality. And I like Grant sharing his thoughts, not just what he went through as a player, but also his loved ones, his dad and his aunt he cared for. So personal experience there, and a lot of talk about recruiting, and then just win, baby, right? I mean, that's it. You want to close some of these higher profile recruits, win. You want to make some lists or be intimidating, and Babbers nailed it again with the respect factor. With for Nebraska to be respected again. W is on the field. Tomorrow we will check in with Brandon Vogel. Coach Gary Barnett joins us. Danny Burke going to be with us, and a special guest and his partner with a podcast that is something we think you should check out. Reminder to get buckled up. Use your seatbelt. It saves lives. It prevents injuries. Only if properly worn. Make it click. A message from the NDOT Highway Safety Office. I am leaning towards being a putz tonight. I was going to go to the gym. Might go to the butcher shop, and I think grilling's a better call. I think grilling is a better call tonight.
I was thinking
went to the gym last night.
Don't twist my leg with getting the grill fired up. I might just have to as well. That sounds fantastic.
Doesn't it? And it's pleasant out. It's not 7,000 degrees.
What are you grilling is the real question.
Well, I have a leftover grilled chicken from yesterday, but I'm thinking maybe a 3-inch thick bone-in New York strip. I'm thinking a pork chop.
See, that steak does sound good tonight, doesn't it?
I think it sounds incredible.
I just don't know if I want to shell it for a ribeye. That's the problem nowadays. It's like, man, I want a steak,
fair.
but do I want to shell it for a ribeye? Probably not.
Pork, it might be the right call, though.
One of those pork ribeyes, like the center cut ones.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Or one of those Husker cuts, those big, thick.
That's what I'm talking about. But center cut's got the bone in there.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh.
I think it's all right. I think I made my decision. We'll talk to you tomorrow, weight room. Elijah Herbel, Chris Schmidt, thank you for tuning in. It's Hail Varsity. We're powered by Cornhead Lager.